Today I'm going to show you how to make a miniature sculpting stand so you can securely hold your figure on there while you're working on it. I'll go over the materials you'll need, the tools it'll take to put this together, and then I'll actually show you how all the steps involved with building your own miniature sculpting stand. Alright, so here's the materials you'll need to make your sculpting bases. You need a piece of wood that we'll cut down to the appropriate size. You'll need a bolt, screw bolt, and a nut. These are 1/4 inch by 1.5 inches long. If you can find 1 1/4, that's I think that's actually a better size, but for some reason I always have trouble finding them at the hardware store. So, and these are 20 thread. I believe it's like 20 threads per inch. That doesn't really matter. Just make sure that it matches the bolt. But obviously you only need one of those per miniature stand. I went ahead and bought 10 though, because I usually make these things in batches. And the last piece of your stand is the Greenstuff, and you'll use that to coat the top of the wood after we assemble it, and that gives you a nice smooth surface. It's the when you're sculpting, the putty you're using will stick to that surface, but it's also very easy to pop off, and if you need to cut it away or something happens, you can easily repair it by just adding more Greenstuff to it. I almost forgot to mention the wood here. This is just pine. You can use any type of wood you want, but this is, you know, cheap. This is only like a little over $1.50, I think, and this one is 2 feet long, I think. You can get it longer if you need to. Oh man, this one's a little warped. That's okay. It won't matter to us. This is about a 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch tall here by 2 feet. And these cost under 10 cents for the 2 pieces. So as you can see, it's very cheap and easy to make. Well, you'll see how easy it is in a minute. Masking tape, ruler, a pencil, mechanical or traditional, power drill, 1/4 inch drill bit, a handsaw, or something a little more powerful, and some additional scrap board to drill your stands on so you don't put a hole in the floor. Alright, now we have to start prepping our pieces of wood here so that we can make a stand. So you need 2 of these, as I think I mentioned earlier, and all you do is you have to put them up together against each other. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually tape it with our masking tape here. So go ahead and rip off a couple pieces. This is pretty tacky stuff. Okay. And the reason I'm doing this is we want to make sure these 2 pieces stay nice and tightly together. This saves a lot of time for both the sawing and the drilling portion of making our bases, because if they're tightly held together by the tape here, then you just have to cut once, and you'll cut both of them perfectly, and they'll line up perfectly, really nice, smoothly. And then when you're drilling, obviously, for a hole for the bolts to go into to secure the stands once you're finished, whoops, then I forgot what I was saying. Then everything will line up perfectly and it won't slip. So I'm going to pause the video here and finish taping this sucker up. Now we have this all taped together nice and secure. You want to try and make sure it's as flush as possible, but it's not super critical, because as you'll see by the end of this, another reason we end up putting the layer of putty on the top is that smooths and evens everything out on the wood, so your figure can stand on a nice flat surface. So this is off just a little bit. There's a little ridge here, but like I said, it's not a big deal. So right now our stand is the height of the wood, which is about 1.5 inches. And when we put the 2 pieces together, you'll see they measure about 1 inch, almost exactly. So obviously we want this to be a consistent square shape, so what we have to do is we will need to cut it down into 1 inch increments, and then we'll have a 1 inch by 1 inch, or roughly 25 millimeter by 25 millimeter square to the base. In order to do that, we get to mark this all the way down, starting one end, going as far as we can. If you have to, you know, go ahead and just mark it on the tape. And just go down the line. Now, I'm just marking on one side here, like this, because the saw I'm going to end up using will allow me to do a precise cut and know that I'm going to be straight and accurate. If you're going to be using a handsaw or something that you have to, or a jigsaw where you have to guide it from one point to the other, then I would suggest also marking the opposite side with inch marks, and possibly even connecting them with a line like that, so that you know exactly where you need to cut across. Okay, so go ahead and mark all that down and then move on to the next step. One more mark we need to put on this. So for the next step, after you indicate kind of where each inch of a stand will be, you need to mark a spot where you're going to drill a hole down in to hold the bolts together. So if you want, you can eyeball that when it comes time to drill it. That's perfectly fine, you know, if you feel comfortable doing that. If not, then you're going to measure, starting from one end, a 1/2 inch, and I like to try and just put the ruler roughly in the center and just make a little mark, and then you'll go every inch from that first half mark inch, and then that should be pretty close to dead center in each of your stands. So I'm probably going to eyeball most of mine though. Alright, so once everything's taped together and everything's marked, next step is to drill the holes for your bolts so that the stand can be secured together once it's all cut to pieces. So for this, you got your extra piece of wood so you don't put a hole in your floor or heaven forbid your leg or something. And you set the drill on the mark you made earlier. Let's see, it's right here. And before you start drilling, just do your best to look and just try and get it. You want to get it as perpendicular and parallel and everything to the wood as possible, because it's not going to be terrible if it ends up coming out, you know, a little off angle at the other end, but it does hold together a little nicer and comes apart better too when you need to do that. So, all right, let's get started. Oops, let's make sure your drill is set to drill in and not drill out. There you go, there's one. I'll do a couple more. So I'm sure I got them a little bit off, but they look pretty well centered. So you don't have to worry about all this stuff yet. If you want, you can, you know, rub it off with your hand or get a file or something, but you can leave it there for now. All right, now we'll move on to the next step. So as I mentioned before, you can use a handsaw or jigsaw very easily for this, but you need to have a steadier hand, and just, it's a lot easier for things to get offset from each other. So what I like to use, now that I bought this sucker, is you know, rotary saw like this. So you just line everything up. This one has a handy dandy laser on it too. Shows me right where it's going to cut. Hold your hand well out of the cut area and start the saw. So this one still has a little bit of tape on it. Let's see if I just want to make sure it's on the camera. Okay, this one still has some tape on it, so it's being held together. But some of these, as you'll see, won't have tape, and so they'll come apart. So you want to make sure every time you cut one off, you pull it aside and make sure it stays together. It's very important, because when you go to pin these together with the bolt, you don't want them to accidentally have been flipped this way or both this way, because the hole will be off center and the cuts on the sides and everything won't line up as well. So you want to make sure that you know and keep these together. In fact, if you want, at this point, you could get one of the bolts and go ahead and press it in to the stand here, just to ensure that you can't get mixed up and have things get lost. So anyways, go ahead and cut the rest of your board up to as many stands as you want or can make. All right, now that everything is cut and drilled and set up, it's time to assemble the miniature stand. So, as you see, I've made sure I took off all the tape, but I made sure that I know which way it's supposed to line up here. You just take your bolt, and you notice there's a lot of extra material there. You can just kind of use the bolt itself to scrape it off. That'll end up being covered up by the bolt, so as well, so you don't even have to worry about making it nice and clean. Okay, and I think I just flipped it. Didn't even follow my own advice. Uh-oh. No, I think it goes this way. There we go. All right. Yep, must have been this way. So as you see, it did shift some when I drilled it, because I didn't hold it together firmly enough. But it's not a big deal. Like I said, you know, when you set it down, it'll tip a little bit. But once we put this layer of putty on top, it will be perfect. And you could do that on both sides too to make it a nice level setting. All right, so once that's on there, you just take the bolt and screw that on. It holds it nice in place. All right, once you have the stand secured with the bolt and nut, you just need to mix up a good size piece of Greenstuff here. I like Greenstuff because no matter how much you heat it, it just seems to stay very consistent and solid and durable. I've noticed with Procreate, even though I like to sculpt with it, it does tend to darken a lot more as you would bake it or it gets heated, and it sometimes can become a little more brittle and whatnot. But this seems to be pretty supple and useful throughout the whole time. So I tend to use a little bit more blue than yellow in this mix, but that is only because I usually end up having a little more blue, and because I sculpt with more yellow, and I don't want to waste my yellow, so I go ahead and just do that. So anyways, you mix up your mount and you just start pressing it down. It doesn't have to be pretty. Don't worry about making it pretty. Just make sure that you get it fairly evenly spread to all four corners of the stand. Oop. Now I didn't tighten this super tight. You don't have to. I usually don't unless I'm sculpting, but if you need to tighten it more, you can just get a pair of pliers or 2 pair of pliers and alternately twist them, and that makes it very secure. Okay. So that's pretty even, and it's pointed to all four corners. If you let it be rounded, what we're going to do here is we're going to press this down on this piece of scrap tile. You can use anything that's hard. You could even just do it on this board, but as long as you had some like some piece of plastic, like a poly bag or what comes with the Greenstuff here. You need something where this is going to more easily pop off, and that works with this tile. So I do like to use a little lubricant just to make sure that it spreads very nice and evenly and can slide right off. Nothing, you don't want anything to get caught or embedded in there, because you don't want it to get stuck, because if anything gets stuck on what you're pressing down on, it will just start pulling everything off and away from the wood. So set that down and then just press firmly, and I kind of twirl it around. I'll show you. You can see a little better view here. Just, you know, press it firmly. Now I'm pressing a little more on this side because this side is the side that is lower if it's turned face up, and I'm trying to compensate for that tilt. So I'm pressing a little more on this side than the other. Okay, and once you get that feeling pretty even, the last step is to just get an X-Acto blade and lightly trim on the side. Do several passes, because if you do it too forcefully, again, it can make the putty move and shift and not have a nice hold. So just go like that. You can also add, you know, whatever normal lubricant you'd use to your tool to make sure that it doesn't stick to the putty. Okay, now that's all trimmed off, you just slowly twirl this off to the edge and pops right off. As you can see, it's a very nice smooth surface. It's much more even out. It is a little tipped, but that's just because of the significance of my how the wood was offset. But again, if I was a little more careful, even when I was pressing, I can make sure that it was flatter. But when you're sculpting, that won't matter. You know, your figure, yes, you might be tipped forward a little bit more, but this is a consistent flat surface. It's not bowed or anything, so it won't mess up how the feet are planted and how they're secured in the armature stand. Once that's done, you just want to set this aside and let it cure naturally, fully. I don't recommend heating it to speed up the cure time like you normally do. There's a good chance there's a lot of there could be bubbles in here, and if you cure it under heat right now, you'll just get lots of little bubbles popping up and pitted. Once it's fully cured, you can cook it in a putty oven or a real oven, and those bubbles aren't an issue because the putty itself is already fully set. All right, well, this is a finished one, but once, I just want to show you the last step. Once the putty is completely cured, all you do is you loosen up this bolt. You don't have to do it a ton. You might try and pull the wood apart just ever so slightly, but you don't even have to worry about that unless the knife isn't going in. You take your knife and you set it into one end here with the putty, and then you just press down, cut through, and it does a perfectly even slice down the middle. And there you have it. That's how you make a sculpt stand. Once it's all put together, you just take your armature, and these are a little long, but I'm gonna leave them that way for now. But as you can see, as long as they avoid the bolt, you press them down in, and then you just tighten the bolt. I like to do it by hand, but sometimes if it's feeling a little loose, you don't want it to be shifting. You definitely don't want your figure to be coming out. And so you can just take a pair of pliers and just hold your finger on this end and twist a little bit. Oops. All right, it's nice and secure. He's not coming out. Nothing can happen. And you're ready to start sculpting. Hope that was helpful to everybody. If you have any questions, obviously post them in the comments below and I'll get back to you on that. Subscribe, like the video, and make sure you keep sculpting.